got to manage myself, I've got to manage my mind. The task is not easy, but to high heights I climb.
I'm determined to succeed, so no excuses, please. If you don't want success in life, then don't hinder me. Yes, let the whole world know you are a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. The time is here to celebrate. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. Yes, let the whole world know. The time is here to celebrate. Success is calling, so don't be late. You are a CEO.
I've got to manage myself.
Hello everyone, Michael Lee Parker here, and this is You Are a CEO. I got my You Are a CEO shirt on, and I'm feeling You Are a CEO-ish here tonight because we are having a great show, part 2 to From Fear to Fuel, and we had a great show last week, and that show kind of set the tone for what fear is about, where fear comes from, how it impacts our life. Now we're gonna go a step further, and as promised, I invited Mr. Terry Fulton back, so come on to the set here. It's good to see you.
You are CEO-ish.
Yes, you caught that. Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so glad you kept your promise. You said you would come back, and we're going to talk tonight about fear and take it to the next level. How you feeling today?
I feel fantastic. Spectaculous.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, spectabulous.
That's right,
Yeah.
beautiful. So listen, tonight we want you to sit back. We're going to have a wonderful discussion. As you can see on your screen, this is From Fear to Fuel Part 2. It is June 10th, and we are now going to jump into more information that will help us all move from fear to fuel. The first thing that I want to do here tonight, and there's going to be a few things, I'm going to ask Terry to go through some activities and kind of talk this through a few things, and then I'm going to do some whiteboard work and do some coaching, so this is going to be kind of fun. Then I'm going to bring you back after I get some whiteboard work done, and we're going to talk about it again. And maybe you can add to it, and we can kind of play off of each other and see what we can get to everyone. So this first thing we want to do, for us to go deeper into this topic, the first thing that I want to talk about is perception. Perception is critical. So we talked about a lot in our last show about fear, about the brain, about the amygdala, how the different hemispheres of the brain impact things, and all of that still feed this thing called perception, and perception is really crucial. Now, Terry, you talk about perception a lot in a lot of the coursework that you do, and so what I would ask you to do, I want to turn the show over to you for a minute and see, can you give the audience a little bit something on perception and walk through some activities as well. But before I walk away, how important do you think perception is?
That's where a lot of those ants live.
We talked about in that last show, if you missed the last show.
What are the ants? What are the ants? Automatic negative thoughts.
That's it.
That's where a lot of them live.
They
right?
live in the house of perception.
Yes, the house of perception.
Beautiful.
Just walking around messing everything
Absolutely. Let me turn this over to you so you can tell them about that house, the house of perception. Awesome. You've been given the power there. I'll be back in just a moment, but take a really critical listen at this, because perception means a lot, and here's a few ways to open your mind to how important it is. I'll be back.
Thank you, sir. So glad to spend a few minutes with you all. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the slides here. So the power of perception is very, very important. And when talking about perception, what you really need to realize is your perception is your reality, and therein, ladies and gentlemen, lies the problem. The question you have to ask yourself is, how near or how far is the gap between your perception and what's real? Right? And so here's just a quick example. So here's somebody that is stranded on an island, and you see him seeing someone in a boat saying a boat. He thinks he is about to get rescued. Here's the problem. The other person has the exact same perception because they're stranded at sea, and they're so happy to see some land, right? Now, this is just a really simple example of two people seeing the same situation, actually similar, but they're looking for a different result, right? And so sometimes you're looking at the same situation differently. So you got to really understand your vantage point, your angle, where you're actually looking at your life from. And this is extremely important to understand because, again, your perception is your reality, and you got to make sure that the influence on your perception isn't creating a large gap between your perception and what's real. So your perception has to be managed is the point of this whole situation, right? So you have to understand that you have a very limited view of things. There's not anybody who has a 360-degree view of everything. Your perception actually really could be wrong of your circumstance, of who you are, of who your boss is, of who your spouse is. So you really got to make sure that you manage your perception and get as much information as possible to reduce the gap and keep your mind in a healthy place. So I want to take you through some exercises here. I want to ask you some things. What do you see? And that's where perception comes into play because it comes through the lens of the eyes. And so what do you see here? I often show this picture. I'm just going to give you about 15 seconds for really quickly. Go ahead, analyze. If you're talking to people, put on the chat there, fill in Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this from. What do you see? What do you see? What's in this picture? Look around. You don't have a lot of time, okay? Do you see the older couple? Do you see the younger couple? Do you see the vase in the middle, or do you see like some flowing yellow water, as some people would say? Do you see an earring, or do you see a bottle? Do you see garments, or do you see carpet? Do you see a lady in the back, or do you see an earlobe? So these are things that I want you to kind of look at. All right, that's all the time that you get. How many faces, ladies and gentlemen, do you see in this picture? Do you see one, two faces? How many faces? 3 faces? Come on, keep counting. I feel like I'm doing an auction right now. How many faces do you see? How many faces do you see? Going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many faces do you see, ladies and gentlemen? You only have 5 seconds left. 4, 3, 2, 1. You are probably wrong, but that's okay. I've heard people say 7. I've heard people say 9. Somebody said 19 before. There are 11 faces. One last look. You're just going to have to believe me because what I'm telling you is true. There are 11 faces. All right, let's go to the last picture here. How many horses can you see in this picture? How many horses can you see? How many horses now? I'm not talking about that one that's trotting on the water. We all know that one. But where are the other certain amount of horses? Go ahead and maybe look in the clouds. Maybe look in the water. Maybe look into the trees on either side. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there are actually 6 horses in this picture, and you can actually infer that there's a 7th. You can go ahead and kind of dwell on what you think that means, but there's an inference of a 7th if you're looking at the footprints. Now, I wanted to just share that because that's how we often look at the world. We start to look at something, we see the exact same thing, and we have a different vantage point or a different perception of the exact same thing. There's a lot of you watching tonight's show, and you're all gonna walk away with a different version. And we're hoping that we're gonna be able to make sure that everybody gets the same information and can take it and apply it to their life so we can help you reduce the gap between your perception and what is real. And so that's what we're trying to deal with tonight. Fear has a lot to do with that. So let me bring the boss back onto the set. Feel like I'm back in track and field. Here's the baton. We used to say, stick.
Oh, nice, absolutely.
So that's perception.
Listen, you did a great job. I really appreciate you walking through that. And every time you show that, I think I have it right. And most of the time I'm wrong. But I know some of you all, don't laugh out there. You was wrong too. I saw y'all out there. I know some of y'all was wrong. But thank you so much. I'm gonna walk through a few more things and I'm gonna have you come back. I want you to join me. We're gonna get into some coaching. But again, outstanding job.
Awesome.
Thank you. See you in a minute. Yeah. So I wanna tell all of you out there, you heard about perception. Perception is extremely crucial to what we're gonna be talking about tonight. And we think about moving from fear to fuel. That's really what this whole thing is about. So So I want to introduce you to a couple of terms before I roll my whiteboard in, and we're going to get into some coaching here. So two things I want to bring up with you to understand. So one is assumed fear versus memory fear. Now, assumed fear is a fear that we get from an assumption. It's not based on anything. I assume it to be true. I assume that that's how it is. I assume, and I have to assume because I'm not sure, right? Memory fear is a fear that comes from my memory. It is related to something that is in the file cabinet we talked about in part 1, that is in our brain, that is stored. And so when I see something that happens, that I can directly relate it to something that I've been through before. So I think Terry shared in our last show a fear of heights and an experience that he might have had. One of them was with me while I was driving. I don't know if he was exaggerating a little bit, but it was real to him. And so that was stored in his file cabinet. I talked about some experiences when I was a child, getting locked in a store, a little toy chest. But those are real memories. So if I was, as a child later, saw a similar scenario, my memory would bring that fear back. But there's some things we never did before. You ever go to an amusement park and you're thinking about riding a ride and you're a little bit afraid, but it's an assumed fear because you're looking at it, you're wondering what it's going to be like to go upside down and turn all kind of ways, but you're not sure if you've never done it before. So these fears are very important, and they shape a lot of what we do and what we go through. All right, so with understanding those two areas, I want to now walk through some specific things. So I'm going to just take a moment here to roll my whiteboard in. And we're going to be talking about a few different things. So hopefully you all can see my whiteboard here, okay? We're going to, as you all know, our shows are live and reality-based, so everything that happens is real, and so, as well as our content and the truth in it. And so I want to talk to you about a few things. So before I get into more of the process from going from fear to fuel, I want to talk about something that was touched on last time in our last show, is when we have certain experiences, right, that actually come about. And those experiences, end up being, let's just say, it turns into a trauma for us. And then through this, we actually begin to develop a specific type of fear. And this can be, something that we're dealing with, where an experience that ends up being traumatic turns into a real fear. Now, what we learned is that when we start having certain new experiences, and those new experiences maybe lead to something that is more happy, or something more where I accomplish something, and we can begin to move from more of a courage about something, or lessen a fear that we may have had. So this is just kind of, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just understand new experiences are very important, because new experiences can have different outcomes. They can lead to different feelings, which create a courage about facing life. Because a lot of times we don't want to face things because of things we've been through, but we have to be willing to make new connections. You heard us in our last show, we talked about neuroplasticity, and that is the neurons in the brain. They actually can grow. They can actually make new connections. You can have a positive traumatic experience in that you learn how to take something that was very, very traumatic, but look for the good in it, and use that good to actually shape things that you want to do moving your life forward. So this is very important. Now, I want to take a minute, though, and go back to some things that we talked about here. Now, I mentioned about these two fears, if you all remember. One was assumed fear. Hopefully y'all remember the other one, which is memory fear. And these are two fears that I want you to be aware of, that we all have, right? We acquired them in some way through different things that we've been through in life. And let's just say that this is you and I, and we're not smiling or sad, but this is us. And these assumed fears, as well as memory fear, they impact how we think, and they generate real fear as an emotion. So we start to feel those fears. We talked about the amygdala and how the amygdala works, how it interacts in the brains and cause those different feelings to come about that begin to generate stress, the fight or flight decisions. And so when we feel fear, see, all of this is what leads to indecision, not really clear what decision to make. Feelings of anxiety can come in. We can have feelings of depression, right? So all of this, we can have stagnation where we really don't know what to do. We feel stuck. All of that, and I love what Terry said in our last session. We talked about the feeling of being paralyzed, right? So all of this comes with that fear emotion. And many times we deal with this fear, and we begin to feel that, the next thing that we start to do is this begins to feed a perception. And this is just one way of looking at it. There's many ways to look at this, but it begins to feed a perception. And that perception then begins to feed reality. And it only feeds it by the things that we assume are true about this perception. But think about it. The perception is, this is pretty much what I think will happen, right? What I think will happen, what I assume will happen. Reality is really what did happen. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind, we have this battle of what we think will happen and what actually did happen. And a lot of times what we think will happen is fueled by some of the fear that we have. That fear begins to drive that, I'm perceiving this because my fear is helping me to shape that perception and it's fueling that perception. Then that perception, eventually my reality comes. But here's the key. When perception drives my reality, I can actually get in a situation where my reality is being created from my perception. And let me explain this. So the danger is if I feel like I can't trust people and I perceive that I can't trust someone, and then in the real world, I start to act in a way that is based on that perception, I can begin to create situations where relationships don't go well, but I'm really creating it because of my perception. So I perceived it to be true, but I made it true because my behavior is based on the perception. So if I start saying that I can't trust people, that's why I don't open up to them. So then I don't open up to people, right? Those people then don't open up to me because I don't open up to them. Because of how I treat them, it causes them to act a certain way. But when they act that way, it feeds my perception that I had. But I created that because my reality and the things I really did is based on things that I perceived before I even got into the real world. So I hope you can see that. But this is really, really important because this, again, is what will cause us to get stuck. So here's another way of looking at this. So I want to introduce, kind of moving from fear to fuel. So one key thing is, instead of jumping right to perception, when we get more intelligent about fear, we can go through another step, which is an awareness. And we can say, I am aware of fear and what it does. I am aware of assumed and memory fear. I'm aware of this process. I'm aware of the amygdala. I know what's going on. That awareness alone, we were talking about in our last show, it allows me to actually stop, to think, to control what I'm going to do next. I've got the fear, but instead of jumping right to the perception, I'm aware of that fear. I'm aware of what's happening to me, right? So when I can move from that fear and awareness, I can actually go to another element that I want to add here, which is courage. Now, this is important because this is new. So I can say I'm aware. And now because I'm aware, I start to learn that I can have a courage now about saying, I want to overcome how I'm feeling. So I'm aware that my emotion says to be afraid, right, of this situation. Be afraid of this business meeting. Be afraid of having this hard talk with someone I love. Be afraid of building a bond with a new friend. But I can say I'm aware of what's happening, and I'm going to now focus my thoughts on being courageous about what I have to do next, right? So letting courage begin to enter in, and this is a choice, it's a decision. You have to decide if you're going to allow courage to come in. So this is something that I want to put emphasis on because it's something that it's a decision and a choice to do, to be more courageous. So awareness means I'm aware of what's happening. And then courage is saying, I'm going to generate positive energy to face the situation. So this is just, we're kind of coaching here today. So I have to generate the positive energy. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't fall on you. You have to generate that. So everything we're talking about today, we can't tell you anything through these sessions that'll just automatically happen. The only thing automatic coming to you is negative thoughts. Everything else is a choice. It's a work. It's a fight. But you can fight. So we can go from courage, and then we can go from there to the real world and say, now, I actually have the courage, and when I start to take action based on that courage, to say, now I have some courage, and I'm gonna actually now go over and shake that person's hand. I'm gonna go over and stay in the conversation when I want to shut down. I'm gonna go ahead and take action toward putting my best foot forward and giving that presentation, right? And now I'm stepping out into the real world with my courage, right? So now my courage now has almost become my, it's overridden my perception to say, now I have a courageous mindset that is saying, I'm not gonna dwell on all my perceptions. I'm gonna dwell on what I feel I can do if I try my best, if I do my best, and if I overcome my fear. Now here's the last and final one that I wanna bring into this. And it's a simple word called content. Now this is spelled like content, but really when we say content, we're really saying to be satisfied with the outcome. And this is really important. To be satisfied with the outcome, to say whatever happens, that I'm satisfied with the outcome because I had the courage to do my best, and whatever happens from it, I'm gonna learn from it. And in fact, we wanna start thinking about being content while we're starting to have the courage. So when we start having courage and saying, I'm gonna have the courage to move forward, I wanna already start telling myself, not only do I have the courage, I'm gonna be content with the outcome. Whatever comes from this, trying to build this friendship, trying to give this speech, trying to overcome, this particular fear, whatever comes from this, when I show this display of courage and I step out there, I'm gonna be content with the outcome and accept that I can learn something from it. I'm not gonna let this begin to feed the fear and get back into this process. I'm gonna stay in this process and learn from it. So this is something to think about. So what I wanna do now, I wanna welcome back Terry Fulton. I wanna talk about this a little bit. There's a lot here we talked about. So come on back in, Terry, in our reality-based show. And I'm gonna give you a blue pen here. You can jump in with me if you want. We might talk about whatever, but tell me a little bit about what I've talked about here. What some things come to your mind when you hear this?
It's a lot here. Understanding this equation is very important to understand. One thing that hit my mind was learned, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of this stuff is learned.
Right.
Not just the memory, but even assumed fear. So, we're taught a lot. Mm-hmm. I like how you used assume, like getting on a roller coaster. I really don't know. Right. But I could be given information that I've never experienced and I really don't know. True. Right. I was taught that. Right.
So it's not really a memory of something I've been through.
I've just been told that.
That's good.
I never experienced
That's
it.
good.
Right?
That's
you're not
good.
gonna like that, or you're not gonna like those people, or this, that, and other. So
That's
a lot
good.
of this is taught, right? Mm-hmm. And then when it's here, I like what you said about even those internal perceptions that create a behavior that reinforce my reality, right? It's the same thing. Racism works like this.
That's good.
You know what I mean? Like ugly things like that. Because I could have been taught a certain thing about people. Right. And then I have that perception, and all it takes is one experience to reinforce that thought. Say, see? Right. They're all like that. Right. Or we talk about the gap between millennials and legacy, right? Yeah. It's like these millennials ain't good for that. All it takes is one to reinforce that. And now what's happening here is this is limited, right? This is, I get stuck. I'm limited without possibility.
Yeah, take a step back. I want to make sure they can see that.
Limited.
So what you're saying here is that now this process becomes a limit to me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do, right?
Right.
Even one of the limits we talk about are fear-based limits.
Mm-hmm.
But in this area is where opportunity is,
That's good.
right? Tunity. You know I can't spell.
No, you're
right.
doing good.
So opportunity exists here because you've opened your mind up to new information, new people, new possibilities.
Right.
And you've removed these limits to be exposed to a whole new world that you weren't even considering at one point in time just because you chose to believe
Right.
it to be true, right?
Right.
So that's the empowerment to me when I was looking at this, is I began to see like this is how you turn your fear into fuel.
That's it, right.
Or motivation.
Right.
Or inspiration. Or courage or anything that's positive. If I go through this process, which this is the backbone to everything,
Right.
now I'm turning that fear that I had into something beautiful.
Right.
I didn't eliminate the fear. I used it for good.
Right. No, that's really good. And I love what you're saying here when you say learned, limiting, and then opportunity. This is really the dynamic that we want to understand, because if we know what we learned, it'll help us see our limits, and then we have a choice if we want to move to more of an opportunity-based approach to dealing with fear. Because when we say fear and fuel, this is really the fuel kind of process, and here was the fear process.
Yes.
So would you agree that the big distinction that puts you on a different track here is this awareness area?
Absolutely.
And that's why we're having this show,
Absolutely,
because
yes.
this is the key to determining which track you're on.
Absolutely. And there's self, right? Awareness, and then there's social. And you gotta have them both. You gotta be aware of self and what's going on internally. You gotta be aware of your environment and what's going on externally. And so this can actually fuel the fear or fuel the motivation if you're not careful. So that's just as important as self-awareness.
So tell me a little bit about the social awareness. So we're talking about moving from fear to fuel. So here we're really focusing on, okay, I'm aware of this process, so I won't just make a perception and let it lead to my reality. Instead, I know what's happening to me, so I'm no longer allowing perception to be the driver of my reality. I'm actually making a choice to say, no, I know what's happening, so I'm gonna evoke courage within myself to decide how I wanna move forward.
Absolutely.
How does the social dynamic, tell me a little about the self and social with related to that process?
Well, I like what you said. I'm aware of what's happening.
Right.
So I'm aware of my environment.
Okay.
I'm aware of who I'm around. I'm aware of how they're influencing or impacting or shaping my thinking. And I have to know that at home. I have to know that at work. I have to know that at school, whatever environment that I'm going into.
Right.
I have to know how they're impacting how I feel about a certain situation. And so somebody can actually plant fear in my mind. If I'm not aware of that, I'm carrying their perception around, not even my own.
Right.
Which puts me on this path, and again, I'm limited by somebody else. Right?
Now, but I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's really critical what you're saying, because you're bringing up that I can be in an environment with a whole bunch of other people's assumed fears and memory fears and all this, and it's all around me, and then I could get to the point in the fuel kind of flow that I am aware of how these people are.
Absolutely.
And that I might be feeling this way right now because of them.
Absolutely.
And if I'm aware of that, I can make a better decision.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is critical because it puts me on the path to make decisions for myself.
Right.
But I don't live in a world by myself.
Right.
So I have to have social awareness to go couple with that. And actually, self-awareness actually expands when I understand the social awareness as well, because I see the relationship between self and my environment.
Very good, very good. So tell me about when we talk about how this is really an opportunity. So a lot of people that I know, no doubt, are watching this show and they're thinking about, okay, you know, here's things that I know I tend to feel fear, right? I tend to, and I know certain experiences that make me have that feeling. I'm more aware after this show, but some people I know are thinking like, how do I start like in real day-to-day life, like tonight, tomorrow, right? How do I start to actually make this a reality for me? Do you have any words about that?
Identify what you're afraid of, right? So that's number one. Now I do got to say this, and I think you'll agree with this. Some places aren't healthy to dig up.
Right.
So don't go there. We're not talking about, there's some dark places that we can go to in our lives.
Right.
Sometimes it's good enough just to be aware and leave it there. Don't dig past that.
Right. Awareness versus investigation.
Yeah, that's enough. But then there are some areas that we do got to get root deep, right? So identify what you're afraid of, right? Then you have to start to, over time, you have to start to, because you're looking for what you're afraid of in your day-to-day life, identify when it happens, how does it make you feel, and then what is the thought process that normally hits your mind in the beginning.
Right.
And then you got to start building capacity to override that to do something different. That's just a starting point, right? We can go forward.
Right.
But if you just took the next month, right, and say, all right, these are the things that make me afraid. I got to know when they pop up. And then I got to know how it makes me feel, which is usually the decisions or the mindset that I start to go down. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I like that. And in a sense, just to borrow some of the board here, emotion is really an education, right? Because when you say, I'm trying to understand my situation, my fear, but if you could even just be aware of when you feel that emotion, like what is it that makes me feel that, and like literally write it down. Like when it comes to this, I feel that, and now let the emotions educate you. They'll speak for themselves. They'll tell you where they are, and once you understand where they are and you begin to document and kind of capture those things, then it's a matter of getting to more of the root cause, where you can start saying the root of this might be tied to some of the things, because now I understand how this works, and that might help you overcome it.
Absolutely. Some of the outputs you can get from this is journal about it. You know, it's a safe place.
Right.
Just write your thoughts and what happened and how it made you feel. You could be really vulnerable with yourself, right?
Right.
But then go talk to some people that you trust.
Right.
I mean, we've had conversations in the past, you know, and I'll come talk to you about some pretty serious, you know, I'm an open book.
Right.
But then you gotta, at some point after all this, you gotta start making sense out of it.
Right. Right.
Now you're kind of starting to, you're in this phase, but once you leave that, now you gotta have the courage to do something about it. Right. So those are some of the things I'm sure you'll bring up in later shows.
No, well, let's do this. Before we go, I just want to hone in here, because I think this is another critical point too. Awareness is critical, but now that I'm aware, this is the part where everyone can't make it to, right? Is to say, am I going to have the courage or not, or am I going to go with my perceptions and let that become my reality? So I'll use an athletic example, and you understand as being an athlete, there's some players who were, you know, great in practice, but when the real game comes, right, and the lights are on, and the fear comes, and I don't know anyone that's about to compete or do something where attention is put on them, that there's not butterflies and some sense of fear. But some people come alive, and courage comes in. They say, you know, I don't know if we're gonna win. I don't know if I'm gonna be doing good, but I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna do my best, right? So that's one person, and some people are really able to do that, and some people aren't. But then some people are even able to have the courage and be content with the outcome. Because some people have the courage, but at the end, if it doesn't go well, they fall to pieces. So would you agree that this courage step is really crucial?
It is, and the key here is, how are you gonna generate that positive energy, that power? Right. Sometimes you don't have it yet. Right. So you got to find somebody, or find a purpose, or find a goal, or find something that's going to drive you in that direction, right? So that's part of the social awareness too. I got to find people that can help motivate me until I got it myself. Right. And then there are things that I'm going to generate this all by myself. I don't care if mom and dad's around, brother, sister, husband, wife, kids. I got this one. My mind is fixed. I'm gonna make it happen, right? And that's a good place to get to as well. But it has to be generated, and you gotta turn it on, and you gotta feed it, so it gets stronger. And so you're gonna stumble along.
Becomes more of a way of life.
Yeah, it becomes a way of life, and now you're a self-generating positive influence on your surroundings and your outcomes.
Right.
And it becomes a lot more easy to be content when you have that kind of power.
I love it. Very well said. Very well said. And so before we close, we've got to address this issue of is fearless always good, and is fear always bad? So, and I will just put my 2 cents in to say that fearless can be dangerous in the wrong scenario.
Absolutely.
Some people, you know, are fearless and it'll cause them to do things that don't have common sense. You can even hurt yourself, right? And then I would also say that fear is not always bad, because I can use fear to drive my performance, and it can be used in a positive way. What do you say about this angle of fearless?
Yeah.
And then is fear sometimes good?
Fear to me is like any other emotion. It has to be managed. And the only way to manage it is if you're emotionally intelligent, right? And so fear could exist in a very positive way. Here's a perfect example. Let's take these road rage people, right?
Oh my goodness.
So let's say you're driving way too fast by habit, 85, 90 miles an hour, right? And you almost get in a terrible accident, or you do and you survive.
Right.
That should give you a positive fear
Right.
that you need to make some changes in your life.
Sure, sure.
Or it could be the health. I'm living vicariously any way I want to, then I go to the doctor and they tell me if I don't change my situation, I'm gonna cut my life 15 years short.
Right.
That should drive a healthy fear.
Very good.
To change my habits, right? And so I can have a quality of life.
Right.
Now, fearless, that could be good sometimes, but like you said, it can also be bad because you can get out of balance or your perception becomes warped. Right. Right. And so sometimes you just gotta be careful and walk that line of sometimes, I don't think it's always positive to be absent of fear.
Right.
If there's a little bit of fear there, that's healthy.
Yeah, and even growing up, right, a child that has nothing to fear, you know, is going to end up in a dangerous situation. They don't understand boundaries. They don't understand, you know, respect. They don't understand certain things. And so we can be that same way in areas of our life. We should fear to talk to someone that way. We should fear to treat someone that way, but we don't, maybe because of how we were brought up. But we have to learn to have a fear that we might have hurt someone's feelings or that we might be treating someone wrong. So that is a very healthy description that you gave there about fear.
Yeah, and if you don't learn it, especially through something comfortable like this, going through this process, life's gonna teach you at some point.
It will, and life can be very direct and cruel, but at the end of the day, if you can learn it and then change, that's the key. So, Terry, thanks again for being on this show. This has been outstanding. I hope you all have enjoyed this, From Fear to Fuel. I hope you've learned, if you just learned one thing, we consider it a success. If we just opened your mind to deal with your fear, to deal with some of the anxiety, understand what's happening to you, and then a path forward on what you can do next. So I want to leave you with a few things. As always, if you're new to the show, go to urcl.com, register, become a part of the movement, download our apps in the App Store after you register, and you can get access to a host of tools, information, education, and coaching around the self-leadership movement of URCEO. And I also always want to tell you to live, learn, and earn. We're living an uplifted life, having mind fitness. You'll find out more about that using our app Uplift. So get in there and find out more about what we're doing with respect to being more uplifted and learning how to overcome the 4 enemies: self-ignorance, mediocrity. We want to also overcome fear, and we also want to always make sure that we don't have our insecurities in the way of anything that we do. And last but not least, we can earn by joining our affiliate program. So if you don't know about how you can be spreading the news, helping create more self-leaders around your life, family, friends, improving their life, and actually you can earn from it, and they can too. Find out more about our tiered affiliate program. Having said that, our next show is related to this series, Overcoming the 7 Fears. And this will be on June 17th, and we'll learn about how to actually categorize fear into 7 important categories, and better yet, how to overcome them. So thank you all so much. Terry, you have any final words? It's always great when I can have you on the show. So you got any final words to anyone out there? I know a lot of people have been impacted by this show.
Yeah, just don't be afraid, right? Just jump in, start to develop the courage, and guarantee you, once you get the ball rolling, fear begins to decrease, opportunity becomes an increase in your life, and then you're on the road to limitless success because your thinking is limitless.
Beautiful, very well said. And so I'll give you the outro again. We need to let the whole world know.
Between this time and next time, let the whole world know that you are
a CEO. Have a great night. We salute you until we meet again.